This is Elaine Miller-Karras. This is Resiliency Within. I'm with my guest, Dr. Michael S. Tobin, who is talking about his book, Riding the Edge, A Love Song to Deborah. So, Michael, another question. As reading the book, one of the things that struck me deeply was just this journey to your meanings about God. And so I actually circled, this was in the beginning of the book when I was reading it. And then I saw that at the end of the book, there was a number of questions and you had the exact thing that I circled. And I thought, okay, this is something I have to ask you about. So there's a conversation between, I think, Deborah and another person. And I want to know how and where you ask God for guidance. Do you scream to God to hear you? Do you whisper? Or do you walk in silence and invite God to join you in your meditation? The response was, I do all that. I let my heart decide. I let my thoughts drift. And when the Spirit moves me to speak or shout, I do. Sometimes I will go for 30 minutes and sometimes for hours. Trust God is there. And what does that mean to you now? I know in my own personal journey, sometimes it's been hard to find God. And then sometimes I feel that, oh, it's right here. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and what was happening on this journey when these questions were being asked and answered?
You know, it's interesting. You asked before we started this interview if there are any questions that possibly could make you uncomfortable. This is probably the question that makes me most
Oh,
uncomfortable. And not because, only because as soon as I or anyone starts talking about faith and deep connection, it comes out, it always sounds to me like a cliche. And I'm afraid in some ways of selling something that's so beautiful and pure. I will say this about myself, that I'm a person of deep faith. you know. I won't go into all of the reasons why, but I am. And I also look at this journey of ours. I often raise the question of how much were we led and how much did we choose? Because I see that as kind of the dialogue that we humans have between us and God. There is some kind of ongoing communication, often through the circumstances of our lives. So I look at circumstances, even the hard ones, like having a wife with Alzheimer's, as a dialogue with God. And that's what has a great deal of meaning for me and helps me. That's a part of what enables me to feel resilient, is that I'm extracting meaning even in the darkest of places. And I feel that's, God, I often say God doesn't run a candy store. It really does not. He, she does not run a candy store. In life is not you pray and you get your goodies. I don't look at it that way at all. Yeah? So on the other hand, I say that part humorously and part, it's not humorously. I say, I had a pizza in Chamonix, France that had vodka sauce, and I'm telling you, God was in that pizza. I was like, oh my God,
this is the best pizza I've ever had in my life.
it was like a transcendental experience. My taste buds were on fire. I was experiencing new sensations that I had never experienced before. I said, what does God put us in this world and have these kind of extraordinary flavors unless we are supposed to enjoy the world as much as we can? We're going to have enough tough moments. Enjoy the pizza moment. Enjoy that moment where you can have a communion with flavors, with human creativity, with your own taste buds, with everything that the Creator put in this world. So,
when you say that, I was thinking about just, this whole aspect of, I spent a lot of time about paying attention. One time I was having a challenge and I happened to be talking to a Tibetan monk, and I was sharing this story with this Tibetan monk. And, he looked at me and he said, Elaine, he said, don't get too excited about this. He goes, be careful who you share this story with. He said, but I think if you just pay attention, that the meaning of it will become known to you. And sometimes the meanings come out not in the large themes in our life, but sometimes the little sparkles that we may not have paid attention to the same degree. And I know I'm resonating with that thought, because it's those little moments sometimes.
100%. I'm resonating with your resonation. Uh, is that a word? With your
Yes.
resonance. Um, in that there's a great quote from the Buddha that I have contemplated many, many times. And the quote goes like this: to know yourself is to forget yourself, to be open to all things. And to many people when they hear it's counterintuitive. What do you mean? I thought we're supposed to know ourselves. Yeah, you know yourself until you don't have to be obsessed with yourself, because as long as you're obsessed with yourself, life passes you by, and those pizza moments don't exist.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the spiritual path, which is
Yeah.
to try to open yourself up to the people in your world, to the flavors in your world, to the scenes in your world, to the pain in your world, to all of it.
Yeah, I call it the whole enchilada. I know this kind of sounds, after you said that beautiful statement, I call it the whole enchilada, because, I'm from California. So we eat a lot of enchiladas in California, but it's all the ingredients of life. It's the spice. Sometimes it's the part that you thought, oh, I didn't know that was going to be there, that little taste. But I think I can't agree more. It's kind of leaning into the suffering, and then we can lean out. It's all part of the experience. And I think that's, if I were to say, I contemplate this aspect of God, but I think it's in those little things and paying attention to those things that have had great meaning for me. Not that I am at all a religious scholar or any inkling, but in terms of just being a human on the planet and trying to see the interconnectedness. And, part of what you talk about in your description of the book is that interconnectedness of all of us as humans. And that's another question I have. Can you talk a little bit more about what were those interconnections that you and Deborah experienced on the journey that really that are also relevant to your life now in the present moment?
Well, I think that I don't know if I'm answering your question directly, but the first thing that comes to mind for me is that um, we kept on having so many of our serendipitous encounters where we're either we're survivors of the Holocaust or survivors of war or the children of survivors of the Holocaust. And we didn't plan that. We didn't go on a Holocaust tour. We want to go on a journey into the heart of darkness. It wasn't, not at all. We had no plans like that. But I mean, as I write about, one absolutely gripping experience was we were in the Pompidou Center in Paris and viewing an exhibit, a photographic exhibit of the Holocaust from Kristallnacht, in the 30s through the internment in ghettos to the concentration camps to the final solution. And there were photos exhibiting and portraying each of those stages of the destruction of most of European Jewry, and as well as many other people. And as we were going on this journey around the room, around Pompidou, looking at the photographs, there's a gentleman, a very attractive gentleman in his 60s, in front of us. And he turned, Deborah was in front of me and I was behind Deborah, because you were walking single file. And he looked, there was a picture of people in striped uniforms in front of a barracks. It was at Theresienstadt, which is in Slovakia and Czechia. And he said, "That's me." He points to a guy.
Oh my
Says, "That's
gosh.
me." And then we sat with him for 3 hours in the cafeteria at Pompidou, and he told us his story. And why us? I have no idea. Were we chosen to hear his story? Was it coincidence? However you wish to define reality. For us, it was a moment. For me, it was a huge moment because it was a moment where I said, I am a completely and totally unaffiliated Jew. I could care less about Judaism or my Jewish identity. And the thought that went through my head was, it wouldn't have mattered to Hitler one bit. He could care less whether I believed in God or didn't believe in God. The fact that
Oh, I think we just froze here for a second. Let's see. I'm just going to continue to speak. Oh, there, okay, you're back, Michael. Go ahead. We
okay,
lost you for just a moment.
okay, sorry about that.
So
So
you were hearing, yeah, you're hearing the story from the gentleman. That's the last part, and you were talking about how you had not been you didn't identify, it wouldn't have mattered to Hitler.
Exactly. It wouldn't matter to Hitler whether I was a good Jew or a bad Jew or any kind of a Jew. It doesn't matter because their definition of Jew had nothing to do with how religious you are. It's merely a function of who your parents were or who your grandparents were, because it didn't, went to the, I think to the 1/8 was enough to end up in the camps. So that was a moment of confrontation with oneself and my identity. And it kept on happening. Those kinds of encounters that you have to be dead inside not to be shaken by them, really.
Yes.
And we were not dead inside. And after a while, it was happening so frequently. We were asking, why? Why are we getting these kinds of messages? You can't avoid them. You can't just chalk them up as interesting stories or interesting coincidence, because they weren't interesting stories. They were gut-wrenching tales
Tragic. Yes.
of tragedy.
Yeah.
This gentleman, Jacob, who was a Dutch Jew, he lost over 50 members of extended family. He was the only survivor.
So as you're, asking, why does this keep happening? Why are we encountering people and they're telling us their stories? So what was the answer? What kind of contemplations did you and Deborah have? Now, because Deborah was her family's from Lebanon. She's not Jewish, and yet she converted. So something huge must have happened in this journey on these 6 months that had caused these kind of revelations and
Right.
transformation.
Clearly, we were having parallel experiences, but different experiences. And she was asking the same question, which is why is it that we are encountering, why is it that my insides are being twisted and turned and, shaken? And what's the meaning of all of this? Where's this going to lead us? We weren't coming to any conclusions. We weren't making any decisions. We were just allowing the experience to do what an experience does, which is hopefully transforms you to becoming a different person prior to the experience. Although it's interesting because Deborah, who grew up in Charleston, West Virginia, had a close affinity she had lots of Jewish friends growing up. She had a very interesting relationship with Judaism that was different than mine. I was running away from it. And actually, a few months prior, or 8 months prior to our going on this trip, she wanted me to go to Yom Kippur services, the holiest day of the year for Jews, in Rutland, Vermont. And I said, I don't want to go. She says, no, you're going. When Deborah would say things that she wouldn't ask, she'd say, you're going. That's the end. Okay, fine, I'll go. I lasted 10 minutes and literally ran away and went for a 20-mile run. I couldn't stay there. Something in me, I hated it. Deborah stayed for 5 hours. She comes back and first she berates me for being such a coward that I didn't stay there. Secondly, she says, I didn't understand a word of what was going on, nothing, but I was crying through the whole experience. So I said, that's what I would have done if I had stayed, cried from boredom. She says,
well, it's interesting because I think I'm remembering a quote, and she said, could it be that I don't know, please correct me, but I'm going to paraphrase what I remember, that there are people like me that were born, let's say, Lebanese background, but that we are the souls of Jews that were murdered during the Holocaust. And so, yes, so I'm recalling that right now. So please, this is connected to what you're saying. Yes.
Recalling correctly. First of all, we don't know if such things are true or not true, but there have been probably about 7 or 8 books written precisely about that, with interviews of a lot of people who believe that that's true. As I write in the end of the book, and when Deborah was a psychologist, after we had moved to Israel, Deborah was a psychologist. Part of her work was taking groups of college students to Bergen-Belsen, Auschwitz, and a number of the concentration camps throughout Europe. and she would process with the students what they were experiencing. But she went to Auschwitz and she stood before an oven and she started
Mm.
sobbing. And she couldn't understand why, other than, she had some kind of, obviously it's very emotional. But she came back the next year and the same thing happened again. So I have too much of a scientific mind to say, that's proof that she had been, burnt in that oven. She was, one of the Jews there and she's now the reincarnation. I won't say it's not true, and I won't say it is true, but
It's so it's so interesting. I have to say this. I was raised Catholic, and when my husband finished law school, we sold everything we owned, and we bought 2 backpacks and sleeping bags, and we hiked through Europe. And I can remember that I had to go to Dachau. And I had to go to Dachau. I said, my husband goes, "Why do you want to go to Dachau?" I go, "I don't know, but I just have to go." So we went to Dachau, and I actually had the same experience that
did you really?
I really did. And this kind of brings tears to my eyes as I'm thinking about it, because it was so powerful and so overwhelming. And then I read every Leon Uris book that was ever written. And I mean, the Warsaw Ghetto, that I know that you have a deep connection to as well. But I have chills all going up through my whole body right now. And I mean, I don't, again, I don't know whether is it maybe Deborah's propensity for deep compassion, that sometimes that there's an energy and a sensation of grief. But what is that? I had the same thing. And it's so funny, I've hardly talked about it with anyone, but I have talked about it with a couple of friends who go, "Well, do you think it's possible that I'm reincarnated? Because I was born in 1952. So the timing works, right?" So, and I remember as a child, one time, a number of times waking up and going to my parents' room, and I would have images of the camps. And
What?
why would yes, I'm telling you, I know this sounds a little strange, Michael. I didn't know this was we're going to go in this direction, but I did.
That's what
And
makes it an interesting
yeah.
journey, by the way.
Anyway, so and
Wow.
I know. So I'm just saying that resonates so deeply with me. And if there's books written about it, you need to send me the name of the books, because I probably need to look at them. But I often think that part of the work I do in the world, which is touching too, about our common humanity, is that if we always look at what separates us, and that is not to do a deep bow and appreciation to our cultural, religious, ethnic differences, but if we don't see that theme of what binds us, that I think it's what leads to more horror and war and separation. And we've certainly seen the vitriol of that in the last few years. And I'm hoping, and this is what I love about your message, and certainly what my program is trying to do, is what else is true, is how we touch, how a woman, what an Arab and a Jew, I think that's the way you describe it, and yet you love each other. And there were differences, but most importantly, there was that love and soul between the two of you that wasn't about that. I don't know.
Right.
That's coming to me right now. So whatever you want to comment about that, Michael, I kind of in
Well,
a
I think that one of the beauties of traveling and being in other cultures and understanding that people don't think like you think.
yes.
And it's important, and the way you think might not necessarily be the best and the truest and the rightest way of thinking, because that's a huge arrogance that the West often has, is that some of my most wonderful experiences, I'll share one, was actually one of the most wonderful experiences, goes to the heart of what you just said, was at around 16,000 feet on the what's called the Annapurna Circuit. And we were a bunch of us who were huddled around a stove burning yak dung and freezing ourselves. And it was like an internet, it was like a United Nations. There was Deborah and I, the old folks, and then there were a lot of, we were the senior citizens there, but there were people from all over the world. And there's another guy at another table by himself, kind of surprisingly didn't look like he fit there. He was overweight and he looked really, everyone's smelly and scruffy looking, but he was even smellier looking, if you can describe it, than scruffier than it. So I call him over. I said, hey, come join us. So I said, what's your name? He says, my name's Oscar. I said, where are you from, Oscar? And I'm in the middle of the podcast, huh? He says his name is Oscar, and he's from Iran. And then I can't use the language he used because it's probably not appropriate for your show. But he used the expletive, and he said, I hate the blank blank Ayatollahs. So that's what he says to me. And then I said to him, okay, Israel and Iran are not exactly best friends. So I said to him, thinking to myself, I said, so Oscar, I want to tell you, I'm from Israel. He comes up to me, gives me a hug. He's a big, big guy, lifts me off the ground. He says, I hate the effing Ayatollahs. And he sits, and we had such a wonderful connection. You get rid of all the politics, you
You
get rid of
do.
the leaders, and you get human beings all freezing to death, sharing, war stories with one another about their travels at high altitudes. And all of a sudden you feel like those differences evaporate.
They just melt away.
They
Yes.
just really, and it was such, I think that is the thing that one of the most beautiful takeaways from traveling is that sense of commonality.
Yeah.
And we got that at our core, we're humans. And I think
Yes.
we seem to forget that a great deal, sadly enough.
Yeah, and I think that the remembrance of those, and I think that those of us that had the advantage of the international travel, like we both have had, as I often say, what do people want? They want to love their children, their families. They want to be able to go to the market in peace. They want to be able to go to their temple, their synagogue, their church, and be able to express their faith. I mean, all those kind of, I call them the activities of daily living. And that's a theme that it certainly runs through all the individuals I met and all the different places I've stopped in the world. It sounds like you've had the same experience. So I have another question, although, um, if you're, this is actually a question I saw in your book. If you are watching an instant replay of your life, what, if anything, you would do differently?
That was a question in my book, really?
Yeah, it was. And I was going, It was an interesting question because as I'm listening to you and going, my goodness, sounds like I wouldn't do anything. I just because it's all experience. But anyway, I'm just curious because it was there. Yes, it was at the end. And this could be one of those questions just saying, I don't want to
It's
answer that.
interesting. They're, I would say this. I would say I've had a life where I really learned from experiences. And probably there have been times if I would redo it, it would have been wiser rather than learn from my failures and experiences, but to learn from other people's experiences and failures. So if I have one regret, I think that I was a bit too, not a bit, that's understand, I was too arrogant to really know how to listen to other people when I was younger, and would have learned from experiences and would have not had to go through some of the difficult experiences I did to understand the things that I do. Um, I mean, I have a number of times, sometimes I do rethink what would I do differently. I have certain relationships before Deborah that I wish I had done differently. But okay, I was young and stupid. So
I think I could probably agree. There's things that we do when we are young. I think it was Mark Twain that said how smart his parents became when he was 25.
right.
Yes, so I couldn't agree more. Michael, we are almost to the end of the show. It's been so lovely to hear your wisdom, to hear about your love for your dear Deborah. And I just want to thank you so much for being here with us. But I also, in just maybe a minute, I know that, Deborah has Alzheimer's. Is there anything that you want to say to our listeners in a very short little soundbite of, is there any wisdom about how to embrace people that we love that are slipping away from us in a different way?
Well, I would say first thing for those of you who may have family members, parents, spouse who have Alzheimer's, first of all, it's painful. It's painful for you. You're watching someone you love transform into something different than the person that you initially loved. You're going to go through a mourning process, and there's a kind of mourning which is called ambiguous grief.
Mm.
because there's no finality to it.
Yeah.
And that's a very hard, and there are aspects of Alzheimer's that can be very difficult. I'm fortunate in that Deborah has only become more peaceful as she's drifted inside of herself, that she doesn't have some of the very unpleasant aspects of Alzheimer's, which can be anger, rage, violence. There's none of that. So I'm fortunate, but people can go through that. First of all, my message to any caretaker is take care of yourself.
Okay.
Get a support system, have friends, get help if you need it, do what you have to.
Okay.
The other part is that you asked is, I think you asked, if not, I'll use this as an opportunity to say, is how do you connect with someone who's different? And we have many conversations within our family with our children. My children are going through a mourning process because their mother was central in their lives. And you have to shift and provide energy in a conversation. You have to entertain and initiate. And when we do that, when I do that with Deborah, I can connect with her on a soul-to-soul basis. We're
So,
not connecting intellectually.
yeah, Michael, thank you so much for that. I think that connecting on that soul to soul basis, it's beyond memory, isn't it? That soul to soul basis. And I just want to say to our listeners, thank you so much for being here. And I think we can hear from Michael's journey that as there is suffering, there's also been great joy. And he embraces Deborah as she is right now with love and soulfulness. And thank you again for being here, Michael. And until we meet again,
Shalom and namaste.
goodbye for today.
Bye-bye.
I must say it went by too fast, Michael. I thought, oh my goodness,
Yeah, wow.
I still have so many more questions. I didn't expect the Dachau thing to come up because that was totally, I mean, honestly, a little
That's,
bit
Elaine, that's the journey. That's why I said to you before, this is
so
why I love
interesting.
stuff like this and meeting people, because especially I don't plan it. I don't like to plan anything. I just like to see where we go.
Well, it's so interesting. People often think I'm Jewish. I mean, they
I
just
know
think,
you're
I
Jewish.
mean, they always think I'm Jewish. And I said, well, I'm not, but, and then, I have a good friend where we became really good friends because we love Barbara Streisand. And she goes, you're just teasing me that you're not Jewish. I said, I'm truly not. I was raised Catholic. I'll show you all the stuff that I was raised with. But the other thing, my last 3 shows, and I think I'm going to have to contemplate about it a little bit. So you're the 3rd show I've done. So my guest on Monday, and these are some lovely books that if you haven't read them, I'm going to encourage you to read them. The other book was The One-Legged Mongoose, and it's about this young man. Let me just do this differently so you can see it because I'm blurred in the background. Anyway, he's like in our age range, but it's all about the journey that is he's Jewish, and it's really about embracing his faith. And his name is Mark Strauss. He was an oncologist in Boston, which maybe, who knows, maybe you ran into him. But I just talked to him on Monday about his journey of, seeing that what happened to him and his family, but about the journey of hope. But anyway, he was my guest on Monday. And then my guest last Monday was another lovely woman, Muriel Schindler. And she's from the UK. And she's written a book called The Cafe Schindler, that was owned by her grandfather and who they lost during World War II, as many members of her family were killed in the Holocaust. And it's about her father dying, and she found a trove of memorabilia. He was like a hoarder of the journey of her Jewish family during before World War II, World War I, World War II. And the Cafe Schindler was in Innsbruck. And it was like the center of all the creativity, and and a person's recreating it. So it's her personal journey of reclamation, really, of her
Yeah.
family's history. But those are my last 3 shows. I mean, so I'm just going, huh,
A message here.
am I getting a message? I don't know. Maybe I've always thought, well, should I convert? I mean, I always have thought about converting, actually, so, but I've never done it, of course, but
tell you
it's
this. I have a
so
60
interesting.
I have a sixth sense about Jews. I really about um, they call like they talk about gay radar. I have Jewish radar, right?
Yes.
Um, if you had asked me, 100% certain you're Jewish. First of all, Miller,
Well,
you're
I had my DNA done because I said, maybe it's in my DNA. I've
right.
got 1%. 1% says it's
Isn't,
Jewish.
by the way, Deborah's 16% Jewish by DNA.
Isn't that something? So then
Yeah.
you end up finding these things out. So there's some bloodline there. But isn't that interesting? I mean, I don't know. It's definitely a part of me, and it's a soulful part of me, right? The unconscious part of me.
You know, these unknown questions for which, I have no answers for. I really don't have any answers. Whether we'll ever really get the answers to those kinds of questions, who knows what's in the next world.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't, yeah, we don't know. But I wonder about, then I think, well, are there energy systems? Because I'm certainly one that leans into science myself, which is when I have conversations like this, some of the times I'm going, oh my gosh, there's a woo-woo girl from California. But maybe there's science, maybe there's an energy that we pick up, that there's some kind of extra sensory capacity to, I think we know that as therapists, right? That we sense things in people, we know things without knowing. And then, but this was like, but going to Dachau, really, it was really quite extraordinary experience. And I always read everything about the Holocaust until I had my first child. I couldn't read anything about it. It was too painful to read. I couldn't, it was too personal.
isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean, not to say, it's not that I just couldn't read anything about it. It felt like it was happening to me. So anyway, but Michael, who knew that we were going to have this conversation? I think, gosh, if we lived in the same neighborhood, we'd be having coffee together.
Absolutely. Yes. So
So
conditional. We can have coffee together
well,
in my
maybe, who knows?
neighborhood.
Maybe we'll end up being at the same spot at the same times. I'm certainly not traveling. In 2019, I traveled 120,000 miles just on American Airlines. So I'm not
Wow.
traveling anymore.
Serious points you accrued.
Oh, I had great executive privileges on American Airlines. I always got bumped up into first class, so that was really nice. But
Wow. Yes.
now I don't know. I'm almost 70. I just don't know. I don't have the same desire to travel. I want to go certain places. I want to walk the Camino in Spain and Portugal. I haven't done that.
Portugal is on well, was on our bucket list, but
Yes.
whether actually we are doing this summer or starting in May, I've decided to do an RV trip of the Northwest of the United States.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I'm recruited three other couples to join us at various times. So I'm renting a RV with 5 sleeping compartments to it
That's
and
going to be one hell of a RV. Oh my goodness.
30 feet long. Um, and it's like a small, you know, like a small yacht on wheels. Um,
Well, you tell me where you're going to be, and maybe I can drive up and meet you for dinner or something. I would
Starting
love to do
in
that.
Sacramento, California. How
Where are you going
close?
to be?
Starting in
Sacramento?
Sacramento. How close are you to
Oh,
Sacramento?
we'll see. I'm like 7 hour drive from Sacramento, but my sister lives in Sacramento, and I just did my own little. I went on a road trip. I actually have never done this before. I said, my husband, I said, I'm just going. I haven't gone anywhere. I'm just going to go in the car and drive up north. So I just drove up north and visited my sister in Sacramento.
How are
So
you?
yeah, so definitely I will try to come if it's possible and meet you for dinner.
Fantastic. Where are you in California?
I'm in Claremont in Southern California, the Claremont colleges. Have you heard of us? Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay. So yeah, I've been to California a number of times. So I'm most of the times in Northern California, but I've never been to the Redwood Forest.
Oh, they're
Yeah,
beautiful.
I know. And I've been in the furthest north was Marin County. But I want to go through the wine country and then go into Oregon and Washington, then east through Idaho and Montana and south, and then back to Sacramento again. So we'll
Oh,
do a
that's
big
going to be a lovely trip. Oh my gosh, I've been to all those places.
I,
So,
I, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I could be canceled. But part of my job is I actually, because I'm going through red states, I want to meet the people that my sister tells me I have to hate. Um, and just see how I want to see how the world, what's going on there.
Well,
I don't know.
if you get to Montana, I have a friend up there. You may have heard of her. Her name's Francine Rustin. She's a rabbi, and she's in Whitefish, Montana. And she made, national news in the US because there were some horrible anti-Semitic cyberbullies.
I
Yeah.
knew that in Montana that there was some terrible anti-Semitism.
Yes, it was.
So
And
white face, it's called.
it's Whitefish, Montana. And Francine lives there. She's happens to be a community resiliency model teacher. She's a teacher of my model, and she's actually written a beautiful piece she wrote in a rabbinical journal about kind of kind of the suffering, but also how learning the skills that I've developed, how that's helped her. But Francine, yeah,
What's her
she's
last
gone.
name?
Her last name is Rustin, Roston, Francine Rustin. But you would,
Actually, Jews in Whitefish, Montana, for her to be a
I
rabbi.
have to tell her, I said to her, I said, Francine, I don't know how you stayed there. She's the bravest person I know, because that is the redneck city. And she is
Yeah.
there with
Oh,
with a small Jewish community there. And she, the person who was doing the horrible bullying ended up being the father of her son's best friend. I mean, this is it's so horrible, insidious, ugly stuff up there.
did he turn around? Did he become a human being?
I don't think so. In fact, there was a whole, lawsuit of things up there. In fact, I asked her, I said, Francine, do you want to come on the show and talk? She goes, Elaine, it's too painful for me. I can't talk about it on the show.
She's a brave lady.
So
She's put herself in harm's way, it
she
seems.
has put herself in harm's way. And also if she does, I mean, she's been vocal about it, but I mean, it's been hard. It's been hard for her.
I'll visit her.
Those
I don't know where Whitefish is,
yeah,
but
no, I would be happy to introduce her to you on, I have your email address. I actually ended up doing, I was contacted by another organization during the COVID epidemic. It's called Repair the World. It's in New York, and it's an organization that works in a primarily Jewish community in New York City. And so I actually introduced Francine to them, and she was helping them with community resiliency model skills during the pandemic. So that's the kind of stuff that I do, is I try to, build these networks of putting people together that can do this work that, represent the culture, the whatever it may be. We do
it's a
so much.
translation of a very, very well-known concept in Judaism called Tikkun ha'olam, which means repair. It's a translated repair the world.
Ah,
Tikkun, Tikkun is actually a little more than just repair. It's kind of
deeper
transform.
than that. Yeah. Well,
It's
look it up. It's a wonderful organization.
repair
And
the
when
world.
I talked with them during the pandemic, it was right in the midst of the worst of it in New York. And she said she goes everywhere, every corner, everywhere there was death in New York City in their community.
Horrible,
It was
horrible.
a very big hit in terms of and also she told me, many of them too, some of them were the old ones were Holocaust survivors. And so it was also interconnected with trauma from the past to the present. And I mean, the young woman, her name is Rachel, who was running the organization. Oh my goodness, I have so much respect for her in terms of what she was doing there. So, well, Michael, I could clearly talk to you for a long time. So I hope this is not our last conversation. And if I can make it up to Sacramento and whatever, just let me know when you're going. You've got my email.
Oh,
And
I will. I will. I definitely will.
and so let
So
me just tell you one other thing too, is that my production manager, John Watterson, he's going to listen to our conversation. He'll do a little sound bite of our conversation. And then he's going to do this really nice little, we call, e-card that will have your image on it, that you can use the sound bite to do your own promotion of the book. And then if you like the interview, you can link the interview to your social media campaign.
we'll
So
do
he's
that.
been doing that for all my guests. So because it won't air till December, he's actually also my son-in-law. We've got everybody in the family working in the family business, right? Yeah, my daughter's a therapist, by the way, and she also works in my nonprofit. She's one of our trainers, as well as having her very active private practice on Zoom. But anyway, he'll send that to you. They're on vacation. That you won't get it till next week.
Okay.
All right.
Actually, my eldest daughter is a psychologist, so took
There you.
care of her parents.
Isn't it fun to talk shop with our kids? I love talking shop with my
Great.
daughter.
I
Yeah.
love all. First of all, she's a brilliant psychologist, and it's she's sort of become my colleague. I mean, she's almost 40 years old, so
Yeah, I know. It's like, how do we get kids that are that old? My daughter's 38. My son's 42. So, oh my gosh, because I'm only 40. How could that happen?
yeah, I don't know. I look at these photos of Deborah and myself on our trip, and I go, "Who are these unbelievably
I
beautiful
want to
people?"
see a picture of Deborah. Do you have a picture there on your desk? Can you show it to me?
Let me see. Do I have a picture of her on the desk somewhere? How well can you see this picture? I'm not
Let's
sure.
see. Okay, put it up to your camera. Oh, no, I really can't see it. Darn. No.
Let me get a better one.
Yeah, let's see. No,
You sort
it's
of
like
can't.
it's too dark. It's like it's
Right,
dark,
hold
so I
on.
can't see it. You'd
Is
almost have to put a light on it, I think.
well, I could do that. Uh,
Is she living? Can she live at home with you, Deborah? Or
you have a caretaker.
oh, that's good. You know, my
Yeah.
one of my best friends, she came to South Africa with me when I was doing a program there, and had been worried about her forgetting. But when I was in South Africa, I realized that she probably had Alzheimer's or some kind of dementia. So when we got back, I talked to her son and my husband and I and her son. She didn't have a partner. We talked to her about, we thought she had something that needed to be investigated. But this was like maybe 3 years ago now. But she's slipped very, well, I haven't seen her since COVID because of course it was not good for me to see anyone or her to see me. But I need to go see her. But I've talked to her son. She can't use her phone any longer.
Okay,
But there's moments.
this is a photo of us 2.5 years ago in Scotland. That's when right before I started having left-sided paralysis. I don't know if you can.
Okay. Oh, I can see that. Oh my gosh, she's beautiful.
Yeah, here's us.
Oh, and she's so youthful looking.
She looks great. She already had, that was a year into Alzheimer's. The decline was slow in the beginning. And here we are, if you can see this photo.
Yes, I can.
That was
That's
right
when you were
before
young. Look at you. Look at that
right before we
beard.
left.
My husband looked like that too.
So, right before we left on the trip. Yeah, I think there are other pictures here. All right.
See.
Here we are in Nepal. It's hard to see these photos.
Yeah, that I mean that's a little bit. Yeah, I can see it a little bit. Yeah.
Here's
Wow.
many grandchildren and children.
Oh, I know. And what a blessing. You've got what, 14 grandchildren? I only have one.
Actually 17.
I only have one. That one is getting lots of love from her grandmother, I have to tell you.
I'm sure.
Yes.
It's wonderful being a grandparent. It really is.
Oh my gosh, it's the best.
None of the responsibility.
Well, my daughter and her husband and granddaughter moved into our house during COVID because we have a big house in California that has a big, huge backyard with a pool. And, you know, when you have a little kid, they were pretty much confined to their home. So they're still here. So they've decided to move to our, yeah, they're still here. They decided to move. We have a whole wing of our house that my father-in-law, who lived to be 105, died in 2019, he used to have. So now they're in that part of the house and they're going to sell their house in San Diego and move here. But, you know, it's not the housing prices. I don't know if it's happening in Israel. I mean, the housing prices are crazy in California. They're totally ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Crazy, insane. I have an office in the center of Jerusalem that I own. It is, I only know meters. It's about 800 square meters, square feet, about 800 square feet. I bought it in 1988 or 89 for $75,000. today it is worth $1 million.
Oh my gosh. So it's crazy there too.
It's insane.
Crazy,
Insane. Insane.
crazy,
It was the
crazy.
smartest move I ever made in my life, was buying this
That was
apartment.
a very smart move. I mean,
It was
it's
a
like,
dime when we bought it.
well, I thought, I said to my husband, we should have just put all our money in buying like cheap houses. We would be like, zillionaires right now. We don't need any more money. My husband's a retired judge, but he got called back during the pandemic because he did a special kind of law for unemployment claims appeals. And the, unemployment, of course, crazy. So he works 3 days a week from the house. So they called him back. So I don't think, I think it was a good thing because he was a primary caretaker of his dad when his dad was alive. So I think he needed something to energize him. So he does that 3 days a week. And then of course I do all the crazy things that I do, which I enjoy thoroughly. So
For you.
yes. Well, listen, Michael, so good to meet you.
Pleasure, Elaine. It
And
really.
I hope to maybe we'll meet each other in Sacramento. Who knows? It's possible.
I will definitely get a write to you about it, and you can decide whether you wish to join us for a day or not.
Yes, well, I hope to. And also if you want to meet Francine, I'd be happy to
Definitely. I have to
do
take
an
a look.
introduction.
I'm going to take out my atlas right now.
Yeah, look at where Whitefish is. You need to also go to Missoula. And one of the
Missoula, I've
things,
heard of.
well,
White.
and the other reason why you want to go to Missoula, outside of Missoula, there is a Buddhist monk who saw this land in Missoula, and he decided that he was being called to do a monument to Buddha in Missoula, Montana. I mean, can you believe a monument to the Buddha in Missoula, Montana? That is true.
My
So
gosh.
if you go outside of Missoula, there is this place of literally 1,000 Buddhas. Look it up on the internet, 1,000 Buddhas. And you can go to this spot, and it is one of the most beautiful spots I've ever seen. And it literally, you can walk through the gardens and the vista of 1,000 Buddhas.
Wow.
And if you go there to Missoula, I'll introduce you to my friend Dana Eisenberg, another wonderful Jewish person who's one of our crim teachers and she's a social worker in Missoula.
Okay, I have actually found Whitefish, and it's right on the direction we would be going in.
All right, you need to
Right
stop and
on the
see.
way.
Stop and see.
It's close to Missoula.
Yep. So you need to go see the 1,000 Buddhas.
The
And
1,000 Buddhas in Missoula.
And Missoula and Francine in Whitefish.
Oh no, Whitefish is a little north. Okay, I see where Whitefish. I was north of. It's north of Missoula, and it is. Okay. It's in Glacier National Park, is where it's at. And we would be coming across that. I can easily go there for sure.
Oh, you need to go to Glacier. Glacier is the most beautiful park I've ever seen.
Glacier National Park. So definitely go Whitefish. And you know what? Send me your email.
I will. I'll do an introduction to you today, to her. Okay.
Fantastic.
All right.
Small world. It's getting
all right.
small.
Okay. So blessings,
Bye-bye.
blessings, blessings. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.